I'm getting a bit tired now of having the news agenda dictated by a disingenuous snitch, someone who is apparently so concerned about Boris Johnson's behaviour that they waited 20 months to share it, and then journalists who themselves have broken the rules, desperately salivating over this so-called rule breach in a desperate attempt for content, ratings and clicks. So, if it's all right with you, I'm going to skip the Boris debate tonight and offer something a little different instead. Because I want to discuss things tonight like the common sense change in COVID isolation rules, a step in the right direction, but do you think they go far enough? And a story which I think should concern us all. The sex abuse of children online increased threefold during 2021. How do we keep our children and our grandchildren safe in this increasingly technological age? And it's been warned today that pensions and benefits will not keep up with the increases in the costs of living. Experts have called for them to be raised to the same level of inflation, but that could cost the Treasury £4.5 billion. So, is it a good idea? And another statue was damaged by an activist. My thoughts are not really about this statue per se, but more I can't help but ponder. Did the Colston verdict provide essentially open season for people to basically damage any statue they like? And should we care? All of that to come and more, but first, the latest news headlines with Polly.
Good afternoon, I'm Polly Middlehurst at GB News. The top story this hour. Buckingham Palace has announced the Duke of York's military affiliations and royal patronages have been returned to the Queen. Prince Andrew, who faces a civil lawsuit in the United States over allegations of sexual assault, is defending this case as a private citizen. Additionally, a royal source has said the Duke of York will no longer use his Royal Highness title in any capacity. The royal commentator Dickie Arbiter told GB News he's not surprised by this announcement.
Whenever he comes out of this, whether it's an out-of-court agreement or whether it actually comes to trial, and he does clear his name, this has been dragging on for too long, and I don't think people will want to have that association with him, and therefore he's now a bit of a busted flush. It's unfortunate, but he shouldn't have got himself into that position in the first place.
Dickie Arbiter speaking to GB News earlier. Well, let's get some analysis on this. Let's join the royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, I don't know if you had a chance to hear what Dickie was saying there. Of course, former press secretary to the Queen, used to being a bit of a gatekeeper, if you like, and saying this has been in the offing for a while. But your reaction to this dramatic news and statement from Buckingham Palace in the last hour?
Well, I think that this essentially was pretty well inevitable. I mean, what has been happening, and this has gone on for quite some time, since in 2015, Andrew first denied the charges, there is no question that he has become a very serious embarrassment after the interview, which has become so notorious on Newsnight. There have been a whole series of episodes. I mean, for example, the FBI wanted his cooperation. He agreed. He hasn't. The fact that his attempt to stop this case was dismissed by Judge Lewis Kaplan, I mean, that may not be a surprise considering the judge's views last week. But nonetheless, the facts are that it is a very, very serious blow to him. The other problem also, you can't get away from endless images. An image of 2001 linking him with Virginia Roberts, as she was then, and also Ghislaine Maxwell, who is a convicted sex trafficker. There's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that you can see the image of Andrew and Epstein, or indeed you could see Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein at Balmoral. All of this is utterly undesirable. And so what was absolutely essential, and the Queen has now done it, is to at least put the lid on this with reference to any royal activities. He kept some patronages and also his military links. He was a serving pilot in the Falklands. There was a 40th anniversary this year, but there's absolutely no doubt at all that this couldn't continue. And also, it would appear, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but assuming he fights this case, he'll do so as a private citizen. This is the year of the Platinum Jubilee. It was not and must not be overshadowed by the lack of wisdom of Andrew.
Richard, you say the Prince initially denied those allegations in 2015. It's up to us to say that he still denies those allegations. But picking up your thought about the military connections, just how much has this move from Buckingham Palace this afternoon got to do with those 150 military veterans who pushed the Queen, if you like, or requested from the Queen in her capacity of as head of state that Prince Andrew be stripped of his honorary military roles amid what they described as their anger and their upset?
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, they played a very substantial part because these links were, so to speak, without a I'm thinking of the Grenadier Guards, his colonel. It's one of the senior regiments of the British Army, and it seemed to be in a sort of abeyance. It was in a form of limbo. So it's quite absolutely right that this has now been clarified. I think it had a lot to do with it. Yes, of course, he strongly denied all allegations, and in the November 2019 interview insisted he'd never remember meeting Virginia Roberts Giuffre and denied any contact of any sort. But there's no question that in the court of public opinion, putting it mildly, his friendships have been an absolute catastrophe, and this case is a serious embarrassment.
And picking up on that, much has been made of the Prince's poor judgment, to quote others. Some saying this is the clearest signal the Queen can give to what's thought to be her favourite son, her second son, that the palace wishes to distance itself now from him as a private citizen.
Totally so, and you'll note what they've done with reference to his HRH. I noticed, although the context was totally different, when Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, stepped back only to be forced, as they saw it, to step down as senior working members of the royal family. They kept their HRHs, but they didn't use it. Well, as you appreciate from the clarification of the statement from Buckingham Palace, he won't be using his HRH. So I think that is a sensible approach. I think unquestionably there was tremendous pressure for this, and there is a sense in which it was a form of damage limitation, because what has happened is that embarrassment has been piled on embarrassment as he's been trying, or his legal team were attempting, to get, for example, the case dismissed on technicalities or on what people would perceive were legal technicalities. This is a deeply serious issue, and of course the FBI want his cooperation to help to trace the accomplices of Epstein for the sake of the victims, and no one has forgotten that disastrous interview on Newsnight. So it's now up to him, and I would only say the likelihood is there'll be some form of settlement, simply because 95% of civil cases in the United States tend to be settled in one way or another. What precisely Virginia Roberts Giuffre and her legal team will accept as a settlement, that's quite another matter.
Richard Fitzwilliam, we appreciate your time. Thank you. Well, in other news today, MI5 has warned MPs that a Chinese agent called Christine Lee is covertly engaging in political interference activities, as they call it, in the UK on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, saying it's deeply concerning that parliamentarians have been targeted. The former Conservative Party leader, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, telling GB News he wants to know how Christine Lee was able to access a pass and roam around Parliament.
It's not just a light, sort of easy-read novel. This is actually serious. As I say, lives could easily be at risk as a result of the activities of these people. Chinese government is a brutal organization. It brooks no dissent, and it deals with people like me and others who are now sanctioned by them. So we need to take this very seriously indeed, and we need to know more.
Ian Duncan-Smith. Well, the Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross has been heavily criticised by fellow Conservative MPs after he said Boris Johnson should resign. The Prime Minister is facing growing calls to quit after apologising yesterday for attending a drinks party in the Downing Street garden during lockdown in May 2020. Well, today, Scotland's First Minister said the insults at Douglas Ross showed Westminster's utter contempt for the country.
Can't even show basic respect for their own colleagues. What chance do the rest of us have? The fact is, Westminster thinks Scotland doesn't need to be listened to, can be ignored, and now we're being told we have to thole a Prime Minister that his own colleagues think is not fit for office.
Police investigating the suspected murder of a woman in Ireland say no stone will be left unturned in bringing her killer to justice. Primary school teacher Aisling Murphy, who was 23 years old, was killed on Wednesday afternoon as she jogged along the banks of the Grand Canal in County Offaly. A 40-year-old man has been arrested and is being detained at Tullamore Garda Station. On TV, online and on DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock, my panel, Director of Reform, Charlotte Pickles, Visiting Professor of London South Bank University, James Woodenhausen, and campaigner Amy Cameron. You know the drill as well on Dewbs & Co. It's not just about us, it's about you and your thoughts. Please do get in touch with me on email gbviews@gbnews and let me know your thoughts. So you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews. I've got to say, there's quite a lot to be going at tonight, isn't there? So whatever's on your mind tonight, get in touch and let me know. Let's start, though, shall we, with this Health Secretary Sajid Javid has announced today that self-isolation period in England has cut from 7 days to 5. Let's just have a listen to that. I'm not Sajid Javid, I'm still Michelle Dewberry. Any second now, you're going to have him? No, you're not going to have him. Anyway, what he was saying is pretty much what I've just told you anyway, so you can hear it from me instead. A reminder that England has cut the self-isolation period from 7 days to 5. This decision comes after data shows that around 2/3 of positive cases are no longer infectious by the end of day 5. Individuals will be able to leave their isolation 5 full days after experiencing symptoms or receiving a positive test result, whichever is first, provided that they've got negative COVID-19 tests on day 5 and day 6. The change will come into effect on Monday. Did you keep up with all that? Joining me to discuss this is the GP, Ken Ashwani. Good evening to you, Ken.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ken. Now, self-isolation, Dr. Aswani, is this a good move in your mind? Reducing it, should I say, not self-isolation as a concept.
In many ways, it is a good move, and certainly in terms of the workforce, particularly with public services, in terms of high level of sickness and putting services like the health service and social services at risk, as well as much of the supply chains, to be able to reduce it from 7 to 10 days, 7 to 5 days, is very positive. The key thing is it safe? And the UK security agency have looked at in detail, and it is safe. There still is a small risk of infection. So when it was 7 days, after that, with 2 negative lateral flow tests, the risk was considered to be 6% of further infection. Reducing it to 5 days only increases the risk to 7%, and clearly with all the cautions and wearing masks and being careful in terms of contacts, that's thought to be a very reasonable judgment. But clearly it will help particularly the public services and where some staff shortages are low. So overall, yes, I think it is a good move and bring us in line with countries such as America, really.
Yeah, and there's talk that these changes apply to, I quote, fully vaccinated people. So what does this mean for those people that haven't had the vaccination?
So what it would mean is that they would still have to take the full 10 days isolation, and that's a precaution that's sort of appropriate at that level. So yes, if you're unvaccinated, it is a full 10 days vaccination, 10 days isolation. In the same way as if you don't have 2 negative lateral flow tests, then your self-isolation period will increase really, and until that is the case, and you haven't got symptoms, just to reduce the risk ultimately.
Yeah, I've got to say, Doctor, just to come back to you on that slightly. I mean, when I asked that about the unvaccinated, you said that it was appropriate, I quote, and that they should continue to stay in isolation for 10 days. Now, I'm not a medical expert by any stretch, hence I'm deferring to you. But to me, it doesn't seem appropriate. It seems absolutely bizarre and not really based on any science, because the vaccinated can still transmit COVID. And as we've just been describing then, the release from this isolation is subject to or dependent on multiple negative tests. So I really don't understand why it's appropriate that the unvaccinated are excluded. So can you help me understand that?
Of course. I mean, a lot of this is ultimately based on risk. And if someone is vaccinated, certainly if they've had their 3 vaccinations, their ability in terms of sort of getting the infection and sort of being able to transmit ultimately is reduced. But it is a sort of level of risk that this guidance is made, and that's what the guidance is given. I don't think it's sort of done in a way to discriminate. It's just sort of just largely on safety, and I think that's what they've sort of concluded, and that's what we will follow, and these judgments are often made in a very balanced way.
Ken Ashwani, thank you very much for your insight there. Let me throw this open to the panel. James, your thoughts?
Well, I didn't understand that last reply at all, but maybe I'm alone in that.
You're not alone.
Right, okay. I think the move is well overdue. It could be not far enough. I agree with you, Michelle, that it does sound discriminatory to the unvaccinated. I think if you want to solve staffing problems in the NHS, it's much more important that you drop the plan to make vaccination mandatory, which is what Javid has at the moment. And it sounds attractive, but the fact is that that will drive thousands of people out of the NHS, perhaps 90,000 if some claims are to be believed, at just the moment when the NHS doesn't need that. So certainly 5 days rather than 7. And can we drop the mandatory vaccination on NHS staff? They need to be persuaded. I've got nothing in common with anti-vaxxers, but they need to be persuaded, not coerced. If they get ill, they should stay at home. Generally, the risks are subsiding, and it's a draconian measure by our health secretary to threaten people's jobs just because they won't get vaccinated.
Indeed. Charlotte?
I share the view. I'm slightly confused as to why in this scenario you treat vaccinated people differently from unvaccinated, because it's based on whether you have COVID and you're infectious at that point. So I don't understand that distinction either. And I also support the move, but I think we do need a further conversation to say we know that this latest variant is far less severe. We know what the hospital data shows us. We are going to have to start living properly with COVID, because we're not going to get to any form of, zero COVID level. And therefore, I think we actually need to have a conversation about whether self-isolation going forward should remain a requirement, or if we need to be moving more towards a model like flu, where we say that, yes, if you're feeling unwell, actually it's probably a good thing people do stay at home for a bit if they're unwell. But forcing people out of the workplace, we had 1 million people out of the workforce last week. That's not sustainable. And it's not just about the public sector, which people always talk about. That is, of course, important. Teachers not being able to teach kids in schools, being forced to stay home, even if they've got kind of, it's a minor impact on them or the health service. But actually, businesses are taking a massive hit at the moment without being able to staff them. So I think we need a much bigger conversation about how we live with this properly.
Indeed. Amy?
Yeah, I would largely agree. Similarly, I think none of us on the panel are medical experts, as you said yourself, Michelle, so I can't speak to the specifics of that distinction between vaccinated and unvaccinated. Perhaps there is a difference. If there isn't, I think I agree with you largely, Charlotte, that we need to be really careful around measures which seem explicitly discriminatory. To your point, James, I don't think that is the right way to encourage people to be vaccinated. I'm 3 times vaccinated. I massively encourage people to be. I don't know that enforcing mandatory vaccination or creating this kind of us and them dynamic is helpful in the longer term. I think exactly to your point, Charlotte, we are trying to feel our way back to a sense of normal. And I think within that context, continuing to listen to the science, and I think continuing on what has been a frankly kind of first in a lifetime, for me at least, sort of public education programme around science and how we interpret that in the context of policy making, needs to carry on. So yeah, I think we are kind of gradually feeling our way back. This is a positive step. Similarly, I don't agree that we should be discriminatory, largely because I think that's an unhelpful way to move people towards being vaccinated.
Yeah, and I absolutely think this is discrimination, and I'm astonished that more journalists are not pushing the government on these kind of things. People just seem to accept it at face value, and I find it completely bizarre. As I've always said and been consistent in this, it's not about what your vaccination status. I couldn't care less if you've had 3, 1, 2, 0, it's your business. What I care about, and I care passionately about it, is all the coercion that's going on at the moment. And I feel that we're on such a slippery slope, and people do need to be speaking out about this stuff. So I'll be fascinated to know why on earth somebody who's not fully vaccinated, so of course you could still have had a vaccine, by the way, and this perhaps applies to you, but if you're not fully vaccinated, despite negative tests, etc., you still have to self-isolate. And of course, you saw Next, by the way, the retailer Next today, saying that they are the latest business that's not going to pay the unvaccinated for their isolation period. So I'm sorry, but I think it's wrong, and I think that there are questions that need to be answered. Anyway, for time reasons, I will move on, because the Internet Watch Foundation has said that there's been a 3-fold increase in online child sex abuse, with 361,000 reports of suspected criminal material in the last year. This is the highest since the group started monitoring online abuse 15 years ago. The online safety group is calling for more support for parents to spot the danger signs which could help remove abuse content from the internet. And statistically, school kids, by the way, have spent more time online in 2021, of course, and have been even more vulnerable to cyber criminals. I mean, what is the answer to this? Should we be giving children less freedom online? Should we be monitoring them more? Are you concerned about this? Do you have kids? Do you have grandkids? Is this on your radar? Amy, I'll start with you on this.
Yeah, I mean, obviously these figures are particularly shocking. Any story of this nature is. I think one of the things I kind of picked up on in relation to this story was that the conversation at the moment is quite based around sort of education of parents. Now, I think that is important. It is obviously part of the picture. However, the much bigger pressure, I think, needs to be placed on the internet giants. So we operate now in a world that is predominantly digital when it comes to education. For many of us, when it comes to work, denying children access to the internet is not a sustainable long-term solution to this problem. However, placing blame, and I think to some extent individual blame, on senior figures within internet companies, within tech giants, is a solution that we need to be moving towards. They have a responsibility to keep the online world safe in the same way that the police and councils and government figures have a responsibility to keep our streets safe. Parents can only do so much. And I think to place, in any of these circumstances, to place so much emphasis on kind of individual decision-making or parental education of children, it's frankly unfair and unrealistic. So I'd like to pivot the conversation to being more around what more can the tech giants be doing to guarantee the safety of young people online.
Yeah, and I just want to give the viewers and listeners a little bit more context. In 2021, the Internet Watch Foundation reported 182,000 instances of self-generated material. And of that, the confirmed cases, 27,000 of these were 7 to 10-year-olds, which is more than treble the number in 2020. So just to be clear, self-generated material there. This is where children have basically been enticed to take part in what would be termed by many as abuse. James, I genuinely find this really disturbing.
Well, it is. I mean, it's hard even to talk about, and I was filled with gloom when I saw this item was coming up. But I think we have to step back, even though the tech giants have a lot to answer for, and ask ourselves about parents without pursuing a vendetta against them. I think you're quite right about that. You know, have we, in the last 20 years, as adults, praised digital natives till the cows come home? You know, that kids know everything about technology, they're the ones to follow, they know everything about climate as well. The key issues for us are self-esteem, our identity, how we look and present ourselves to the public. Has adult behaviour encouraged kids in any way to contribute to the figures that you report, Michelle? Not that I'm blaming the kids, I'm not even blaming the parents. I think society has lost its way. It's very difficult to tell which way is up, and therefore self-generated material, such as you were talking about, is something that everybody does. It's what used to be called user-generated content.
7-year-olds, James.
Yeah,
I mean,
but they're not indifferent to the adult climate, where these parochial and narcissistic and selfish concerns are paraded on the media all the time. So I think the wider question is, what responsible roles are adults playing for children? Are they encouraging them to get out and bruise and graze their knees, or do they tolerate their bedroom IT activities as the grooviest new thing? We should be getting kids out of the bedroom into real life, and that's the thing that parents have often neglected in the past decades.
Yeah, Charlotte, I mean, James references, this is a gloomy subject, quite a depressing one, I've got to be honest, but I think it's such an important conversation to have, because I wonder if many parents even know what their kids get up to online. You have this whole kind of set of apps now, which I'm quite opposed to, that it's kind of disappearing messages. So kids are messaging people and then instantly gone. So even if you wanted to check the kid's phone, there's no audit trail of what they've been doing. So I feel sorry for many parents, because it must be an absolute nightmare trying to get on top of and stay on top of what your kids are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have children. If I did, I think I'd be terrified about the kind of murky online atmosphere that they're in. And I think, you know, both Amy and James have made really good points. But I think we do have, to James's point, we do need to ask ourselves whether children and young people are spending too much of their time closed off in their bedroom, online. But equally, as Amy points out, you know, this is partly the world we live in. And I think, you know, yes, we should do as much as we can to get them out, but kind of railing against the sort of the reality of where we are right now, I think is not going to help these incredibly young children who are being groomed effectively to provide this content, which is what's happening, which is why it's self-generated. They're being groomed by horrific people online. And I think that's where, yes, we do need to get the internet giants to step up. That's what the online safety bill going through the Houses of Parliament at the moment is trying to do, create greater accountability. You know, Ofcom is going to start regulating these bodies in a different way. But ultimately, if we can help parents to have good conversations with their children, to understand the risks better and to feel more in control. You know, the NSPCC has a great programme called Talk Pants, and they have this dinosaur that they use to try and have conversations about, you know, your private parts are your private parts. And these are aimed at very young children, and they've got guidance to parents as to when maybe to have those conversations. Light touch, but trying to sort of say to kids, don't feel pressured, don't feel you have to do this. It's okay, talk to someone if you're in a negative experience. So I think there is an element where actually parents can be helped to do more in this situation.
Yeah, and I think kids have to understand that anything that they put online can be screen grabbed, it can be used against them. And if you think that you are sharing something in the privacy of a conversation between you and another child or another person or whatever, trust me when I say that that is not always the case. In fact, probably more often than not, it's not the case. And the other thing that I would like to see as well is all these porn sites, some of the content that you can see just as a casual search of something quite innocuous. Some of the content that you get presented back to you, it's an absolute disgrace. Fine, yeah, for consenting adults, but for children that are seeing this content, I think it's disgusting. And actually, I think shame on a lot of these companies, by the way, that don't hide some of their content. I really think it's wrong. Anyway, we've ran a poll on GB News' Twitter. We've been asking, do you think that children should be given less freedom online to prevent sexual abuse? 81.3% of you so far have said yes, no. I find this quite interesting. Nearly 20% of you said no. How fascinating. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have more topics and some of your reactions as well to some of the things we've been discussing. Don't go away, and I'll see you in just a few minutes.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. We've just been talking there about kids and what they're getting up to online. There is a campaign actually that's been launched, and some of you are getting in contact asking what can parents do. Well, if you want help and guidance on how to stop your child being real, what I would say is quite a substantial risk of sexual abuse online at the moment, you can visit the following website, stopabusetogether.campaign.gov.uk. And if you look at that website, I have to say it's very good. Lots of advice there for parents, for kids. So if you're concerned, do check that out. Anyway, it is just gone 6:30. Let me just pass you back over to Polly Middlehurst with an update from the GB newsroom.
Michelle, thank you. The top story this hour, Buckingham Palace has announced the Duke of York's military affiliations and royal patronages have been returned to the Queen. Prince Andrew, who faces a civil lawsuit in the United States over allegations of sexual assault, is defending this case as a private citizen. Additionally, a royal source has said the Duke of York will no longer use his Royal Highness title in any capacity. Let's get some analysis and reaction on that now from a former head of Royal Protection, Di Davis. First of all, your reaction, Di, to the news today.
Well, I'm delighted in one sense that at long last this matter has come to a head. It had to come to a head once this verdict was given by the judge. And in one sense, as far as the military titles are concerned, I think that's perfectly right. And I'm pleased that his HRH status is actually going to be not used by himself. What is interesting now is whether Scotland Yard will review the 3 times they have not decided to actually investigate the allegation of offences committed here. That, to me, has been a crucial factor. Why haven't they, and who decided that they shouldn't merit now an investigation? And that's crucial as far as I'm concerned, because now he's a private citizen. If it was you or I in this situation, I'm sure Scotland Yard would have investigated it, and I'd like to know who has decided 3 times it doesn't warrant. There are witnesses, there are royalty protection officers, there are people in the government and others. What do they have to say? And clearly, hopefully, some of this will come out.
Interesting, the palace have reacted so quickly, it seems, at least anyway, to that letter from about 150 military veterans from all 3 services saying they have been angry and upset and urging the Queen in her capacity as head of state to pull those titles from the Duke of York.
Well, it's very interesting because a lot of disclosure, I suspect, has already taken place. What is there that may come out? We don't know yet, but I suspect now that people will be interrogating, or if he agrees to, what kind of evidence can be provided. And of course, witness statements, medical evidence, and all this now can be pursued, which previously until now hasn't been done. And whether or not the FBI will pursue their request to interview remains to be seen. But clearly, being a private citizen takes away the aura and the mystique in terms of investigating a member of the royal family. And justice has to be done. And in fairness, he hasn't been found guilty of anything. But it is interesting to me what evidence now is either there and they know, and we don't know at this stage.
Di Davis, we appreciate your reaction. Thanks for talking to us on GB News.
My pleasure.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I want to talk, if I can, briefly about the cost of living. This is a topic that raises a lot of conversation and debate at the moment, and a think tank now has warned that pensions and benefits will not keep up with the cost of living. Benefits will need to rise in order to match the massive energy bills that we're hearing a lot about, which has increased the cost of living for so many people. The Institute of Fiscal Studies, the IFS, has said that 10 million people were affected by price hikes that were not matched by benefit rises. The IFS has also said that raising benefits and the state pension to the same level as inflation in April would prevent a £290 million fall in benefit income year on year. Such an increase, though, to pensions, pension credit and the state pension would apparently cost the Treasury around £5.4 billion. Well, what do you make to that? What should we be doing about it? Amy Cameron, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, first of all, we should acknowledge that the benefit system in particular hasn't been keeping up with the cost of living for quite some time. So even pre-COVID, 1 in 5 people in the UK were living in poverty. That was before the pandemic. That's before the current squeeze on living costs. So I think, yes, absolutely, these costs need to be keeping up with changes in living costs. But for starters, they need to be, first of all, meeting the immediate need, the current existing need. So that would be my first comment. And then I think, absolutely, we are living in a time at the moment where oil and gas companies in the UK are having their most profitable year since the financial crash in 2008. While people on benefits and people in freezing cold UK homes, including pensioners, are being pushed to breaking point. That is not right in anyone's eyes, I don't think. So I would absolutely call for both immediate support for those in need. That's people on universal credit, that's pensioners, that's anyone struggling within the current kind of fairly shambolic benefit system. And also at the same time, the government needs to be able to both kind of walk and chew gum at the same time. They need to deal with the immediate crisis while seeing off future surges like this. And that means things like insulating our homes. We've got the coldest, leakiest homes in Europe, and pensioners are in far too many of those. So absolutely, I think action is needed. I think money is plentiful when it comes to the energy system in the UK, and it's not being given to the right people. So,
Charlotte?
my thoughts.
I mean, I'm very sympathetic to what Amy's saying, and I would absolutely echo the point that we have a very, very bare bones benefit system in the first place. And actually, if you look at the amount that if you're out of work and dependent on benefits, the value of that basic amount you'd get in the benefit system a couple of years ago was actually worth less than it was in the early 1990s. So that is how much we've eroded the support we give to really poor households. I think the age thing is a bit of a misnomer. Actually, pensioners are the wealthiest age cohort, and I think we tend to over-focus at times on pensioners. About 1 in 5 of those are, in wealth terms, millionaires now. But there is definitely a cohort of pensioners who are really struggling. So I think if we're going to look at giving additional funds, we need to be targeting it based on need, and just using the entire pension system doesn't do that. There's quite a lot of wealthy pensioners. And as you said, the price tag of increasing this is very high, and the pension element would be a very large chunk of it. But things like pension credit that goes to the poorest pensioners, basic out-of-work benefits, top-ups in terms of people who've got low income, I definitely think the government should be looking at this. And, you know, I think in a few months' time, when this is really hitting people, I think the government is going to be even more on the rocks than it is now.
James?
Well, I can't quite go along with that, actually. I think, obviously, it's the case that some pensioners are well off, but if you're heading towards a means test, I fear I can't be on that bus. You know, I think it's...
Oh, I'm not for one moment suggesting you mean to test the pension. We already have a means test system in the pension system. We have pension credit, and then we have the pension, the state pension that you get. I'm saying that if you want to target what are limited resources at the moment, we have incredible pressure on the public finances. If you want to target it, go for those pensioners that are really struggling.
Yeah, but, you know, it's all very well, but you talk about, you know, terrible pressure on public finances. The Treasury would agree with you, but I would point to the billions, maybe 17 billion or more that the Ministry of Defence has lost in a black hole, the billions that were wasted in the test and trace scheme and so on. So before we target, you know, supposedly rich pensioners, you know, maybe the state and the Exchequer could pay a visit to the Moat and Beam Department. I think, if I may, Michelle, the energy dimension of this is very interesting, because I specialise in that field. And listening to the schemes that you were talking about, Charlotte, on pensions, I mean, I'm struck by the labyrinthine winter fuel payment, warm home discount scheme, cold weather payments, household support fund, energy obligation. Just counting the forms I'd have to fill out, you know, to get hold of any of that stuff. And I'm not yet 85. I'm already feeling pretty ill about it, you know. So I fear that the legacy of Ian Duncan Smith, your boss before now, and the welfare system, and certainly in the energy dimension, it's not looking good for when £2,000 bills hit older people. Yes, older people who feel the cold and are at home a lot of the time.
Well, I must jump in and say that none of those things were created by IDS. They were all far before him. So just as a small defence there of, as you say, my
Did he battle against them?
Certainly, I mean, the whole point of universal credit was to try and wrap multiple
consolidation.
But you know, I don't want to digress. But yes, actually, Ian brought in a lot of simplification, but not far enough. You're absolutely right. It's still far too complicated. Actually, many pensioners feel it's a stigma to apply for benefits, and I think working out how to get past that, because, you know, these are pensioners who've worked hard all their lives, and actually, if they are struggling, we should be there to help them. So I absolutely think there is something in simplifying. But it's just not IDS's fault.
I think the wider issue here actually goes a bit back to, oddly enough, to the question of, you know, online child abuse, which is, do we like old people or do we prefer young people? And I think broadly in society, among the commentariat, they prefer young people. You know, I've had it said to me here at this panel, therefore, old people, you know, why don't they just moulder a bit and let's pay them less, as you say, over the years.
I didn't say pay them less at all.
No, you were pointing to the statistics,
right,
you know, that showed that they had been paid less. Right. Now, obviously, nobody evinces these attitudes directly, Michelle, but I think there's an undertow of distaste for the man holding you up in front of the cash point and all of that stuff.
Well, I'm going to let these guys argue about old people versus young people during the break. I'll let you relax and have a break. Coming up afterwards, we'll be looking at a man that's been arrested after scaling a statue outside the BBC. Why am I interested in this? Well, just because I wondered, the whole kind of Colston verdict, the sentence in there, has that created an open season for people to damage statues of people that they don't like or find distasteful? And should we care about that? I'll see you just in a couple of minutes.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co. Michelle Dewberry. And just as a reminder, in case you're listening to us on the radio and you can't see us, Charlotte Pickles, director of the Reform think tank and a former advisor to Ian Duncan Smith, joins me. Amy Cameron, who is a campaigner, and James Woodhausen, who is the visiting professor at London South Bank University and always tells me every time he's on here that I get his name pronounced wrongly. Did I do it right that time?
You got it right that time.
Good, I've been practicing. I've been sitting in my own bedroom practicing your surname over and over again till I get it right. So I'm pleased that I got it right today. Anyway, I have to say you guys have been getting in touch on all the topics that we've been covering tonight. Prince Andrew has got you talking. Michael says he's completely embarrassed the royal family and the UK. He needs to be completely banished and, let's hope given time, forgotten about. Adrian says you cannot blame the Queen for distancing herself from him. It does not look good. Peter says, well, if Andrew is now considered a private citizen, should he still be called Prince? Jennifer says, I just feel really sorry for the Queen in all this. And Leanne, and I have to say, Leanne, I found your point very interesting. Leanne says, what about not innocent until proven guilty? How does that work? I do have to say, I hear what you're saying there, Leanne. I do think it's all very bizarre, given that we're just at the stage of accusations at the moment, as opposed to anything being proven. Anyway, do get in touch and let me know your thoughts on all of that. You've been in touch as well about the child abuse one. Someone here is saying that some of my 7 grandkids have reached the age where they get a phone and now start to venture into social media, and the thought of it scares them to death. Children, this is the next one's from Ben, saying children shouldn't be given freedom online, full stop. James says, Jimmy has said, why would we stop someone's freedoms just because of some perverted criminals? Why don't you focus on catching them and giving kids the freedom that they need. There you go. Do keep your thoughts coming in. I want to briefly move on though, because you will all be familiar by now with the statue, the Colston statue, and the kind of case that went on there and the verdict of not guilty that came back in terms of criminal damage on that case. And I found that verdict quite interesting. Obviously, it's gone through the court of law and it is what it is for now. But it did kind of get me thinking, would that have a knock-on effect when it comes to what other people think that they can and cannot do for statues of people that they find distasteful or they don't like? The reason I'm mentioning this now is because we saw another instance of attempted statue removal just yesterday, and a man has been arrested for scaling a statue outside the BBC's broadcasting house in London. The guy began bashing the statue that was sculpted by Eric Gill, who is said to have sexually abused 2 of his daughters. You know, I saw the footage of this. It's really doing its rounds on social media. Many of you might have seen it for yourself. I wonder, what are your thoughts? I'm going to start with you, James, on this one. What do you think to this? Well, and I want to make it clear, by the way, I'm not necessarily sitting here with nothing better to do than focus on statues. I'm focusing more on the concept of, should you be able to... Have we now got an open season on basically people saying, well, look at him, he's done this and he's done that, so down it comes? Is that the kind of society we want to be in? Is it right?
Definitely not. And I think, you know, I'm on the left, but I think the left's willingness to believe that when the cause is right, anything goes is really irresponsible. And I think what they've created, actually, Michelle, is a society where Eric Gill is now better known for his child abuse than for his graphic design. He was a leader of 20th century graphic design. I use every day Gill Sans as a typeface.
Fonts, yeah.
What am I supposed to do? Think, oh, well, that was tainted by Eric Gill, so I've got to change it back to Times Roman now. That's the sort of censorious atmosphere we have.
Yeah, but the difference is, I mean, I'm showing the footage, by the way, of the guy, you know, whacking it there with his hammer or chisel or whatever it is. But the difference is there, what you're saying, James, you're talking about a font that you'd use. This is like a statue there, basically honouring him.
Yeah, but, you know, his achievements have to be separated from the man. That's very unfashionable to many feminist cohorts today. But it has to be said that he was a giant of graphic design and a brilliant sculptor. His acts to his children and lovers were utterly despicable, and there's no contest. We don't want to be involved in a contest as who can outbid each other by removing more of the statue or more of his typefaces as we possibly can. The atmosphere is completely denying his achievements and simply goes on about his misdeeds. It's very destructive.
Charlotte, James is saying there that the achievements should be separate from the man. And basically, are you saying that those statues should remain in situ? Yeah, so there you go. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know what it's got to do with feminism. I think probably abusing your daughters is a human issue, but I'm sure that's not what you were at all.
Some feminists insist that the artist, if he has done wrong, can no longer be considered as an artist.
I don't think
that's a mistake.
Specific.
I said some feminists.
We're probably digressing here, though. So to
it's quite important. It's the main issue.
I think. I'll not pick that up. I'll focus on the statue. I think the first thing to say is that I think if you're vandalising public or private property, if you're damaging something, then I'm trying to be very careful on the legal terms, as Michelle, you pointed out, but I don't understand how that isn't a crime and how you shouldn't, and therefore why you wouldn't be prosecuted. And if we think the law only applies to certain things because we agree with them or disagree with them, then I think we're in very, very, very dangerous water. That said, there clearly is a discussion to be had because an awful lot of people want to have it. And, you know, if we live in a democracy and we believe in free speech and we believe in, you know, exploring lots of different perspectives and views, we should have those conversations. And if there's a majority that feel uncomfortable about a particular statue, then I don't feel massively strongly about saying, well, if the majority wants it taken down in a legitimate way, it should be. But I do think it's interesting that we are fixating, I mean, almost to your point, James, on the font question here, that we are fixating on statues in this. And, you know, we were having a conversation before we came on about why, for example, we've got films produced by people who have been convicted of pretty awful things, you know, whether it's Weinstein or Roman Polanski, or you know, think of John Lennon, who's a self-declared kind of domestic abuser, but we don't kind of call into question his music. So I think we need to at least move away from this narrow understanding. But criminal acts are criminal acts and should be treated as such.
Amy?
I think we're slightly jumping to conclusions here. There is nothing to indicate this man won't be prosecuted for this act of vandalism. I suspect that he will, at the very least, be prosecuted. Whether he is found guilty, obviously up for, to be seen, I guess. I thought it would be a sort of freezing over of hell situation when I agreed with Jacob Rees-Mogg. But in the instance of the Colston Four, I think we should remember it was not the left or feminists who found them innocent. It was a jury, an independent jury of members of the public who sat in a courtroom and heard dispositions that we did not hear. So I think we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions on this case correlating with others. I think, Charlotte, your point about the conversation of the art and the artist is one for another time, Michelle.
Indeed, one for another time, indeed, because we're almost off air. Tim has been in touch saying, yes, this whole statue thing does matter. Culture matters, and our culture is under attack from within and without, so you bet it matters. Lots of you in touch about the pension thing. Ray says, state pension is not a benefit. I paid national insurance for 50 years, never lived off the state at all. Christine says, I do not class £162 a week as me being rich. I have no heating here as I cannot afford to replace my boiler. Christine, that story makes me very sad. You should Google. I know that there is at least one plumber who offers free plumbing services to people that are vulnerable and can't afford to do. Google that if you get a second. Anyway, that is all I've got time for tonight. Charlotte, Amy, James, thank you for your company on the panel and thank you for your company at home. Have a good evening and I'll see you tomorrow 6 o'clock till 7 o'clock.
Hi there. Clear and frosty for many overnight, and then some dense fog patches to contend with first thing Friday. Otherwise, it will brighten up through the day, many places seeing sunshine by the afternoon under this area of high pressure. It's near the centre of this high pressure where we're likely to see the dense fog and frost. Much of England and Wales then, but Scotland and Northern Ireland a bit more of a breeze, more cloud, and some persistent rain moving through the Northern Isles during the evening, pushing into the north of the mainland overnight. With the cloud and the breeze in the far north, well, it's going to stay frost and fog free here, but further south under clear skies, well, it's going to be a particularly chilly start to Friday. -2, -3 Celsius, typical temperatures as we wake up. And those dense freezing fog patches in places. The greatest signal being West Midlands, Welsh Marches, West Country. And some of these fog patches in places could last throughout much of the day. Where that happens, it will stay really quite chilly. But otherwise, once the fog's gone, sunshine replaces it across much of England and Wales. Some brighter spells for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but that persistent rain in the far north still around, albeit petering out by the afternoon. And then we do it all again.